Welcome to this week's episode of Forgiving the Girl Inside. Today we have a beautiful guest, SarahJane Smith. She is an embodiment teacher and life coach who helps fellow childless, not by choice women reestablish trust and connection with themselves and their bodies. And it's so powerful, our minds and our bodies, how everything is just interconnected and interrelated. You know, when we receive our thoughts, it creates this emotion in our heart, and then we use our hands to get the results. And when it's not in alignment, our heart's desires gets confused, and we really kind of get stuck in this pain from the past that doesn't help us to move forward. And SarahJane has done an amazing job. She's going to share with you today her story of her journey about going through a struggle with her body. So thank you, SarahJane, so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. I know we're going to talk about forgiving yours truly, and I'll let you tell the story. So where were you at before, and tell us a little bit of the journey about the struggle that you had, this conflict with your body and your mind.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So in my journey to being childless, not by choice, I had a long struggle with infertility and had multiple miscarriages. And so along the way, there was sort of an ever eroding loss of confidence in my body that turned into sort of a dislike and having sort of a negative relationship with my body. Like it couldn't do what it was, quote unquote, supposed to do, or what I saw other women's bodies doing around me seemingly just freely and easily. You know, that's an assumption. And every pregnant woman I saw, of course, I didn't know their story, but that's just where my mind went to. So the infertility journey was about 8 years and ended with me having a hysterectomy in 2018. Wow. Because of a chronic illness. And so that ended my journey to trying to expand my family through having a baby, and what led me to being childless, not by choice.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. How did you respond when you received that news?
The news that of having the hysterectomy? Mm-hmm. Well, it was mixed because of so long trying. It just felt like an endless road. And there's I had internalized a lot of the sort of chatter of the sort of infertility movement to like never give up hope, you know, your day will come, your miracle will happen, that kind of thing. Yeah. So it felt like I didn't have a chance, or that I wasn't doing the right thing if I decided to stop trying to conceive after losses and so long doing it. It's very wearing physically, mentally, and emotionally to be in that state for years and years and years, and compounding grief and loss and just feeling more and more isolated. So having the diagnosis that I needed to get a hysterectomy was almost like the permission that I needed to say, okay, enough is enough, without having to sort of deal with those constant thoughts of like, well, what if we just kept trying? What if we'd done this? What if we'd done that? It just sort of like was a line in the sand to say like, okay, it's over. So it was definitely mixed. Yes, there was a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, but it was also the beginning of opening the door to forgiveness and acceptance of the way my life is.
Yeah. What was the pivot point that helped you to realize that you could forgive yourself and, you know, understand and realize that you weren't going to be able to raise children that you bore naturally? I mean, because you could adopt, right? Did you end up adopting any children, or?
No. Yeah, the hysterectomy was I would say the only pivot point. Every other sort of change along the way was incremental. You know, it's from going from 8 years trying to conceive and having multiple losses. It's then a slow road out the other side, right? It's not just like a, okay, well, now I forgive myself and now I accept it. You know, even after having the hysterectomy, there was a certain amount of grieving that still needed to be done, that that it was the actual end. Because up until that point, even though all signs had been showing that I wasn't going to be able to sustain a pregnancy and have a baby, there was still hope. So living every month with the hope, and then feeling devastated when I got my period every month. So up until having the hysterectomy, it was just the same cycle over and over again. So it took quite a while. So I'm 4 years away from that surgery now, and it keeps improving. You know, I feel like I'm at a point where, yes, I've fully accepted it, and yes, I've forgiven my body. But just like any other grief, you know, it sort of is with you in some shape or form for the rest of your life. And depending on other things that are happening, the amount of forgiveness and the amount of acceptance can fluctuate up and down, just like any other feelings and emotions. And I think it's quite unreasonable to even shoot for like 100% from this moment on. I feel I accept and I forgive myself, because that's kind of unrealistic, because we will all have times, and depending on what else is going on in our lives, when things sort of fluctuate. You know, you might have a bit of a down day and different thoughts come in, but then the next day or a few days later, it might shift.
Yeah, I have a similar experience, and I talked to a lot of ladies. And the month of May, we did a podcast blast sharing the secret. And one thing about loss of a child is you never stop grieving, and you always are going to remember, just like you said, and your body remembers. And there's certain times of the year, the days, the months, seasons that you all of a sudden are triggered, and you might all of a sudden just feel sad or feel like crying. And when you ignore those feelings, that's when it becomes more painful, when you could just receive and process that information. And forgiveness is a big thing, because I know a lot of women thought that they forgave themselves, thought that they forgave their bodies, but they still struggled with that. And you know, one of my fun thing to do, I like taking challenges, is to do a word challenge. And I like to get to the root cause of the matter and of the word. And forgiveness is often so misunderstood, because it's just, I forgive myself, I forgive you, period. It's over, it's done. But that doesn't mean you're not going to still feel the resentment, the anger, the frustration, or the joy, or whatever. But looking at that particular trauma, you know, and it's for anything, loss of a child. But I think when you have that loss, you know, the hopes and the dreams and what could have been and never came to materialize, it just was abruptly ended with no control. And sometimes women feel like their power was taken away from them. Did you feel that way, that you had your power taken away when you were going through 8 years? Is a long time to have that and to be continuously disappointed. So I have two questions. My first question is, did you feel your power was taken away? And secondly, how did you handle and work through that?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of semantics, but feeling like my power was taken away sort of implies that somebody or something was taking it away from me. And I don't necessarily identify with that. But however, I do identify with feeling powerless. And there's a slight difference there for me. And that, yeah, that I couldn't do anything to change my situation. So I did feel powerless in that scenario, for sure. And one thing that helped me sort of turn that around is the practice of self-compassion. And so that's one of the main foundation of what I do, or the work that I do with myself, but with other childless women, is this practice of embodied self-compassion. So it is the mind and the body together, not just thinking the thoughts of self-compassion, but also being aware of how your body responds, and knowing that the body is a really great ally out there in the world and can tell us so much and give us so many clues and insights as to, sort of our values, our intuition, and our desires, that kind of thing. And so I teach and practice this thing called embodied self-compassion. So my definition of it is coming home to yourself and meeting all parts of yourself with kindness and compassion. So you have all those feelings, like you were talking about, you might forgive, we do accept, and there's all of these other feelings over here. So it's not covering up feelings that are harder to feel or that are considered negative or unuseful emotions like resentment, anger, but it is recognizing and making space for those emotions within yourself and meeting. It's almost like you would meet a friend who's experiencing the same thing, but you're creating the space and meeting yourself. So the kind, compassionate part of yourself is meeting the part of yourself that feels angry and resentful, and integrating that, not necessarily trying to change it, but noticing, oh, I feel angry. This is how it feels to be angry. And knowing on connecting that other people feel this way too. So sort of like the three main sort of tenets of self-compassion or mindfulness. So like noticing, oh yeah, I am feeling anger right now. The second one is shared humanity. So it helps us to bring ourselves sort of like out of isolation when we recognize and acknowledge that we're not the only ones feeling this way. Sort of knowing and connecting that all childless women at some point do feel or have felt the same thing that I feel. So it brings us into this sense of belonging. And then the third one is offering kindness to those parts of yourself. So it's kind of like a 3-step process.
Oh, that's beautiful. And do you incorporate journaling with that, or is it just going through?
Yeah, definitely journaling. So by yourself, but in groups, it's also really powerful then to share what you've written, because then that adds in the other another layer of shared humanity. And been in lots of groups where we've done a practice of self-compassion. We've had some journaling prompts, and then it's a free form sharing. You can share whatever you want. You can read exact sentences. You can talk about your experience. You can just read certain words. And it's the look of familiarity on everyone's faces of like, oh yeah, I've felt that. I understand that. I know that. Then adds to that layer of shared humanity.
That's beautiful. It's similar. I'm a certified aroma freedom practitioner. We use aroma cognitive technique to work through that, connecting all 5 senses with our thoughts. And like you said, there's no negative or, good feelings. All feelings matter. We're created to experience every emotion. And a lot of times we don't want to experience anger because it takes a lot of energy. But I think it takes more energy when you ignore it, and then it festers. Years ago, I did a retreat on feelings, and we were talking about the 4 different types of stuffing your feeling, stuff and explode, and the other 2 escape me. But I used to be that stuff and explode. I'd let things go and hide it. I wouldn't talk about it. And then something would trigger me, and you'd see World War III happen in my words that I used in my body language. So it's incredible how that just automatically does that when you can center yourself and focus. And I like that. I love 3s and 7s. So I love the fact that you have like this 3 three-step process where you can just connect and really talk. And how do you find, like, when ladies come together in a group setting, do you find that people are shy, that they don't like to share, or do you get like a lot of engagement?
Yeah, it really depends on the people and where they're at in their journey. It's a lot of times people come to childlessness and they may have never spoken to anybody outside of their doctor or their partner, or maybe one friend about their experience and about childlessness. Because a lot of it, even though there's so many women who experience it, it's kind of one of those things. We're an invisible group in society, even though there's so many of us. So, and it also depends on where someone is at in their journey to acceptance. Sort of if it's new, that they have only known their status for a little bit, they might be more shy. Others are really looking for connection. So I think it really depends on those things, as well as someone's personality. We do most of our work online, which I find is a really great way to meet, because people are comfortable, they're in their own homes. If they decide that it's too much, they've been triggered, they can turn off their camera, they could even leave the call. There's so much more agency with this sort of online way of meeting, and so much more safety.
Yes, that was the word that came to mind for me. You have that safe place.
Totally.
You can come in at your own pace and just have that freedom. And a lot of times, when we hear each other's testimonies and the stories and what another person is going through, you can really, it really relates to you personally, and you can get so much healing that way. So do you have an open program, or do you have certain times where people can join, where women can join?
Certain times. The next, I have a 6-week course coming up, launching maybe sort of mid-September, beginning of October. And so it's sort of a 6-week intensive where we meet twice a week online. One of the calls is to do embodiment practices. I'm a longtime yoga teacher, so that's how I sort of came into this. So I have a lot of experience working with the body and emotions that way. So we do these embodiment practices of trauma-informed yoga, breath exercises, meditation. And then on the other call, we do journaling, sharing, that kind of thing. And we form a really great sort of tight-knit group of women who are there for each other and sharing freely. And there's an incredible healing happens.
Oh yeah, especially when you incorporate yoga. I recently got into yoga last year after I had a full hysterectomy in January of 21, and wasn't able to I was doing HIIT workouts and using a plyo box, and I was like, oh, you can't do any of that. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, well, I need to do something. So I got into yoga, and it just, at first I had a hard time adjusting to it because it was so centered. Now I enjoy it. So now I incorporate it. Now I can fully work out, but I do yoga once a week, and I just really enjoy it. I gotta say, downward dog is my favorite. Something about stretching that way is just, and I was really proud of myself, because someday I want to get my friend accomplished this, doing a handstand. I was like, wow, she does aerial yoga. I was like, so I can balance on one leg. So we'll see about I said, someday I'll work my way up to that.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's incredible how, you build so much strength just with your own body. So I love that you have that incorporated, and it's such a beautiful practice. And the power of the breath, amazing. Very
I teach a specific style that is a bit different than you might find in a yoga studio. It's a trauma-informed yoga. So it's not focused on building strength or building flexibility or working up towards big poses like handstands, and that's all great, but that's a different style, so this is very much self-guided, as much as something that's being guided by somebody else can be self-guided. So I might say something like, raise your arms up above your head to a height that works with your shoulders.
Okay.
So you might see people, sort of doing this, or some people will have full extension. But what it does, it invites the practitioner into the conversation. They're not just blindly following directions. They have to think like, oh, well, what is a height that works for my shoulders? What does that even mean? And it might change every day. So it's through this movement, through, instructed movement, it's helping people with agency, with taking control of what they're doing with their body, and making all the decisions, but within the context of everybody else doing that as well. And because we practice online, the participants can't see each other, but I can see all of them, and everybody is doing something different. And that's the point of it.
That's beautiful. I love that. Well, how can our audience that would love to connect with you, what's the best way to reach out and get acquainted with your programs and learn more about you?
Yeah, so 2 ways, through my website, which is embodiedpossibility.com. And then I'm also very active on Instagram at embodiedpossibility.
Okay, beautiful. And those links will be in the description. So thank you so much for just being here and sharing your story and your amazing healing journey, and how you incorporated something you already had inside of you. It just made it to share with others, to have that support. And like you said, there's so many women out there that feel that they're alone. And if you're listening to this, you know that you're not. And if you want to hear more stories, check out May of 2022. Every single day, there's a story of a woman sharing a loss of a child, whether through abortion, miscarriage, or stillborn, or death due to illness, or what have you. There's so much support, and it's a safe, non-judgmental place to be, connecting with any of the coaches that had shared their stories. And always, if you want to connect with somebody you're not sure, reach out to me. I will get you to the right person, because I really want you to be on this healing journey and to understand and know that you are designed for greatness. And when you could heal, when you reveal, you do heal. So be sure to connect with SarahJane, especially if you want to check out this yoga. I'm intrigued. And thank you so much for being here. Remember, everything that we do, it's a matter of the heart.